Welcome students, welcome to lecture number 19 where we will be covering module number 4 under subject Indirect Taxation. So module number 4 as we know is about input tax credit. So in our previous lecture, that is lecture number 18, we had seen a brief introduction about input tax credit, eligibility to avail input tax credit. And we are remaining with the registration part and the returns. So today we will be covering registration under GST, persons not liable for registration, compulsory registration in certain cases, what is the procedure for registration, and deemed registration. So registration, before we move ahead with what is registration under GST, let us know the relevant sections which are applicable in respect of registration under GST. So section 22 talks about persons liable for registration. Section number 23 talks about persons not liable for registration. 24 talks about compulsory registration in certain cases. Section 25 talks about procedure for registration, and section 26 will be talking about deemed registration. So these are the different registration every supplier of goods or services or both is required to obtain registration. So every supplier who's supplying the goods or services, or he's providing both goods or services, is required to obtain registration. Okay, registration in which state? In the state or union territory from where he makes the taxable supply. So he has to get himself registered in that particular state or that particular union territory from where he is making the taxable supply or he is providing the sales. Suppose I am providing goods or services from the state of Karnataka. That means I am required to be registered in the Karnataka state. I cannot register myself under GST in some other state where I'm not providing the goods and services. So remember that when any supplier is supplying goods and services, he is required to take registration only in the state, only in that state where he is making the taxable supply. Only if his aggregate turnover exceeds the specified threshold limit in a financial year. So what is the basic criteria for taking the registration, or what is the basic condition for taking the registration? His aggregate turnover exceeds the specified threshold limit in the previous year. Now here two things we need to understand. What is aggregate turnover and what is threshold limit? Once we know these two terms, then we can know who are the persons liable to register under GST, or when is GST registration required to be taken. So let us first understand what is the meaning of aggregate turnover. As you all know, turnover is nothing but your sales, your supply. Okay, whatever outward supply that you're providing is your turnover. So what is the meaning of aggregate turnover? What all should be included in the turnover? So let us understand that. So students, aggregate turnover includes, now this aggregate turnover, when you're calculating for a particular client, or you have to check that the aggregate turnover includes value of all outward supplies. That supplies can be either taxable supplies, it can be either exempt supplies, it can be either exports, interstate supplies. So what you have to do while calculating the aggregate turnover, take the value or total of all the outward supplies. Suppose I am a supplier and I am providing a taxable supply. When I say taxable, means it is charged at some GST rate. So suppose if I am providing basmati rice, okay, now suppose it is India Gate rice. India Gate is branded rice for which it is liable to tax, and I am providing loose rice also. Loose rice means loose rice means which is I'm just selling it without any packaging, loose in loose quantities. Okay, so here taxable supply is my India Gate rice. Exempt supply is my loose rice, because rice which is not branded or sold loose is exempt under GST. Okay, so now when I'm going to calculate my aggregate turnover, I'm going to take the total of the sales that I've made under India Gate and the total of the sales that I've made under by selling the loose rice. So that becomes my aggregate turnover. So remember students, aggregate turnover when you're taking, you should not only take the total of your taxable supplies, but suppose if you're engaged in providing exempt supplies also, suppose if you're engaged in exports, suppose if you're engaged in interstate supplies, then you need to take the total of entire supplies in order to determine your aggregate turnover. So remember students, aggregate turnover includes value of all outward supplies, okay, of persons having the same PAN be computed on all India basis. Now what do you mean by this? Suppose if I am selling the goods or supplying the taxable supply from the state of Karnataka, I have my showroom in the state of Maharashtra as well. I have my showroom in the state of Telangana as well. I have my showroom in the state of, suppose, Madhya Pradesh as well. So what you have to do is take the total of sales that you're making on all India basis, that is including Maharashtra, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh and Telangana. Take the complete total on all India basis of the person having the same PAN. Means only you can total, since I have only one PAN number, and that PAN number is going to work on all India basis. When I say all India basis, in the Maharashtra, I am the same person who is providing the supplies. So, and I'm the same person who's providing the supplies in Telangana, Madhya Pradesh. So what does this mean is, of person having the same PAN be computed on all India basis. So in short, you have to take the total of all the outward supplies that is made in more than one state on all India basis of the person having the same PAN. You can add only my particular outward supplies. You cannot add someone else's outward supply in yours. Okay, so you have to total up all the outward supplies of the person having the same PAN be computed on all India basis. Now, what does this aggregate turnover excludes? So when you're calculating aggregate turnover just to see whether he is liable for registration or no, you have to not include certain amounts. So what it excludes? It excludes CGST, SGST, UTGST, IGST. And cess. See students, when you're making a sale, so you charge CGST, SGST, IGST, whatever, depending upon the place of supply, right? You charge the tax. But when you are calculating aggregate turnover, just take the sales value excluding the tax value. So that means, suppose if my sale is of rupees 1000 and on that I'm charging GST, just take 1000 rupees in your calculation of aggregate turnover and exclude all the taxes. What all you need to exclude again while calculating aggregate turnover is value of inward supplies on which tax is payable under reverse charge. So suppose if you are liable to pay tax under reverse charge, then whatever tax you're paying on the reverse charge, you have to exclude that particular value, because again reverse charge is from the side of recipient, it is an inward supplies. But when you calculate aggregate turnover, you have to just concentrate on your outward supplies. So again I repeat, aggregate turnover while calculating, you have to see what it includes and excludes. Remember, you have to add all the value of outward supplies, okay, in on all India basis, and you have to exclude the GST taxes that you're leaving on that, and you have to exclude the value on which you're going to pay tax on reverse charge basis. So I hope everyone has understood the meaning of aggregate turnover. Yes, students? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In common language, if we say turnover is nothing but the volume of the business, right? But this volume in terms of GST, it means all the outward supplies. Now let us see the meaning of threshold limit. What is this threshold limit? In a financial year, you all know the meaning of financial year. So now we have understood what is aggregate turnover. Now, let us understand what is the meaning of threshold limit. Means government has set a limit. If the value of aggregate turnover exceeds that limit, that particular limit, then registration under GST is compulsory. Otherwise, it is not mandatory and you can voluntarily take if you require. So let us understand this meaning of threshold limit. So what is a specified threshold limit? Students, when the aggregate turnover, we have seen the meaning of aggregate turnover, exceeds 20 lakhs. Suppose if any supplier is supplying taxable supply and his aggregate turnover is exceeding 20 lakhs, okay, is registration required? Yes, for normal category states. Now, what is normal category states? Excluding the northeastern states. Okay, now where the aggregate turnover exceeds 10 lakhs, is the registration required? Yes, for special category states. That is for usually the northeastern states. So the special category states is like Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura. So that we will be seeing now. So just remember, when the aggregate turnover, okay, of a person supplying services. Earlier for goods and services, there was only one threshold limited. But now there is a change where for goods, the threshold limit is different. And for the service provider who is providing services, the threshold limit for registration is different. So just remember, if the aggregate turnover of a particular service provider exceeds 20 lakhs, and exceeds 10 lakhs in special category states. What are special category states? Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura. If it exceeds, then registration is mandatory. This is in case of services. Now, the new limits for sale of goods, that is the person who is exclusively engaged in providing goods, the threshold limit, if it exceeds 40 lakhs. So, if the aggregate turnover exceeds rupees 40 lakhs, okay, then registration is required, yes, for normal category states. Is this clear? So just remember, earlier the old rule was the same threshold limit. This exceeds 20 lakhs, 10 lakhs. In case of goods and services, it is to apply to both. Now, for services, if it exceeds 20 lakhs and 10 lakhs in case of special category states, and in case of goods, if it exceeds 40 lakhs. And for special category states, it remains the same for goods and services. If it exceeds 10 lakhs for goods and services, registration is compulsory. Now, let us understand which are these states. Okay. States with threshold limit of 10 lakhs for both goods and services. See students, for both goods and services, for special category states, if the limit is exceeding 10 lakhs, when I'm talking both goods and services, okay, which are the special category states? Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland and Tripura. Now, states or union territories with threshold limit of 20 lakhs for both goods and services. Now, where the limit is your 20 lakhs limit, okay, there it is: Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Sikkim, Uttarakhand, Puducherry and Telangana. That means these are the states where the threshold limit is 20 lakhs if it exceeds 20 lakhs for both goods and services. Now, states or union territory with threshold limit of 20 lakhs for services and 40 lakhs for goods is Jammu and Kashmir, Assam, Himachal Pradesh and all other states. So in these particular states that you can see on the right hand side, here the threshold limit of 20 lakhs is for services and 40 lakhs is for goods. For all other states excluding these states, including Jammu and Kashmir, Assam and Arunachal, Himachal Pradesh. Is this clear, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now this is the specified threshold limit. Now you know what is aggregate turnover, you know what is specified threshold limit. Then our question is, who is required to take registration under GST? Simple answer is all the persons who are providing goods or services, okay, whose aggregate turnover exceeds the specified threshold limit in a financial year. Next, persons not liable for registration. So, who are the persons who are not required to get themselves registered under GST is first, persons engaged exclusively in the business of supplying goods or services or both, which are not liable to tax. So, what does this mean? That any person who is engaged in providing the goods or services, okay, which are not liable to tax, they need not get themselves registered under GST. So not liable to tax, like suppose any person is engaged in producing the crude oil, petrol, diesel, aviation turbine fuel, or maybe alcohol for human consumption, okay, they are not liable to get themselves registered under GST. Okay, next, persons engaged exclusively in the business of supplying goods, services, both wholly exempt from tax. So, suppose they are exclusively engaged. Exclusively means they are providing only those goods or services which are wholly exempt from tax. There is no combination of exempt services as well as taxable services that they are providing, or exempt goods or taxable goods they are providing. These persons are exclusively engaged, means they are, and the primary business itself is only selling those goods or supplying those services which are wholly exempt from tax. So this person's not liable for GST is covered under section 23 that we have already seen. So if they are engaged completely in supplying those goods or services that are not liable to tax, they are not required to take GST registration, and they are not liable to take GST registration. Suppose there is some, as we know that services, healthcare services are exempt from GST. So suppose if any hospital is just providing those services which are covered under healthcare services, then they are not required to charge, they are not required or not liable for registration under GST. Next, agriculturists to the extent of supply of produce out of cultivation of land. So then any person who's an agriculturist, okay, and he's supplying the goods or that are coming out of cultivation of land. So when he does the agricultural thing on his land, and out of whatever cultivation he is making, whatever he's receiving the crops or goods and whatever is selling, okay, then he is not liable for registration under GST. So what is the meaning of agriculturist? Is who, a person who cultivates the land, okay, by his own labor. By his own labor means he himself makes an effort to cultivate the land, or by the labor of a family, that is suppose his family helps him in cultivating the land, or by any servants or who are on wage basis. Okay, these wages can be payable either in cash or kind. So either by hired labor, he himself or his family members are helping him to cultivate the land. So if he's selling any goods, okay, which are produced by cultivating the land, and if he's selling that, he is an agriculturist and he is not required or liable for registration under GST. Next, specified category of persons notified by the government on GST Council recommendation. So there may be a certain category of persons which the government may notify. Obviously, government can notify anything on GST only when it is approved by the GST Council. You know what is GST Council. Now, what are those specified category of persons is? First one is persons making only reverse charge supplies. So what does this mean? So if the person is exclusively just making reverse charge supplies. Now what is reverse charge supply? Where the service recipient is liable to pay tax and not the service provider. So for example, if I am suppose if I'm an advocate, you know that suppose advocate services are covered under reverse charge that we have already seen. So suppose if I'm advocate, okay, whatever advocate services I'm providing. I am not liable to pay GST. Whoever is receiving my services, that is the service recipient, he is liable to pay GST under reverse charge. So what happens here? Since I'm not liable to register under GST itself, since I'm covered under the reverse charge supplies, therefore I am not required or liable for registration. So the first category of persons here is students, persons making only reverse charge supplies. Reverse charge supplies means I'm making an outward supply, but government is saying since you're service provider, since you're covered under reverse charge, you do not pay the tax, the service recipient will pay the tax. So if first category of persons is persons making only reverse charge supplies. The second category of persons is persons making interstate supply of taxable services up to 20 lakhs. So where the limit is only up to 20 lakhs, suppose if I'm providing taxable services, an interstate supply I'm making, and where the value is only 20 lakhs, okay, it is not exceeding 20 lakhs, then I am not liable for registration. Next, the third category of persons is persons making interstate taxable supply of notified handicraft goods up to 20 lakhs. There are certain goods that are notified by the government as handicraft goods. Suppose if I am providing or supplying those goods, okay, interstate supplies, and where the value is not crossed 20 lakhs, then I am not liable for registration under GST. Okay. Next is casual taxable persons making interstate supplies of notified goods up to 20 lakhs. So casual taxable persons also, they are not liable for registration under GST if they are making an interstate supply of the notified handicraft goods. When I say notified means it will be notified by the government, okay, where the value is only up to 20 lakhs. So these are certain specified category of persons which are notified by the government on the recommendation of GST Council that they are not liable for registration under GST. So we have seen four category of persons like that. That is persons making only reverse charge supplies, persons making interstate supplies of taxable services up to 20 lakhs, persons making interstate supplies of notified handicraft goods up to 20 lakhs, okay, and casual taxable persons making interstate supplies of notified handicraft goods up to rupees 20 lakhs. So they are not liable for registration. So these were certain category of persons who are not liable for registration. So students, is this particular slide clear to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, students? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So just to see whether you'll have understood this, I'll just ask a few examples. Just tell me whether they are liable for registration or not. Suppose Mr. X, okay, he is a supplier in Maharashtra and he's exclusively, students, he's exclusively engaged in supplying potatoes, okay, and these potatoes are produced out of the cultivation that he is making in his own land, okay, within the state of Maharashtra and even outside the state of Maharashtra. He is supplying potatoes within the state of Maharashtra, outside the state of Maharashtra, but these potatoes are produced, cultivated in his own land. So tell me whether he is required or liable for registration under GST.
No, ma'am.
He is not liable for registration. Can you tell me the reason why?
Ma'am, he himself cultivate those potatoes in his own land.
So it is covered here. Persons engaged exclusively in the business of supplying goods or services, both wholly exempt from tax, plus agriculturists to the extent of supply of produce out of cultivation of land. Okay, so that is the reasons he is not liable for registration under GST. Yes, students, did you all understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let us move ahead. compulsory registration in certain cases. Now here we are going to understand who are the sets of persons or category of persons who are required to take registration, okay, compulsory, irrespective of the threshold limit. So let us understand. First one, persons making any interstate taxable supply. So persons making any interstate taxable supply is required to take registration under GST. However, we have seen that the threshold limit of 20 lakhs and 10 lakhs in the case of special category states like Mizoram, Tripura, Manipur, Nagaland is available. And in case of interstate supply of taxable services and of notified handicraft goods. So we have seen in those cases, suppose if I'm providing taxable services, okay, we have seen up to 20 lakhs, and we have seen if he's providing interstate supplies of notified handicraft goods up to 20 lakhs, then he need not take registration. Exception these two, all the persons making any interstate taxable supply is required to be compulsorily registered under GST. Next, casual taxable person making taxable supply. However, we are going to exclude whom? We are going to exclude all the interstate taxable supply of notified handicraft goods that we have already seen up to a threshold limit of 20 lakhs. They are not liable. But apart from that, all the casual taxable persons making taxable supply, okay, are required to compulsorily register themselves under GST. Next, persons who are required to pay tax under reverse charge. Who are required to pay tax, students? Who are not, I'm not talking about those persons who are providing reverse charge supplies. Now the recipient, this is from the angle of the recipient, persons who are required to pay tax under reverse charge. Okay, now, we have seen that persons who are exclusively engaged in providing outward supplies, which are liable under reverse charge, they are not liable for registration. But this is from the angle of service recipient. Okay, persons who are required to pay tax under reverse charge, they are required to be compulsorily registered under GST. Simple reason, because what is the reason? Because if the service provider is not paying tax, obviously the service recipient is liable to pay tax under reverse charge basis. Next, non-resident taxable person making taxable supply. We have already seen what is the meaning of non-resident taxable person. He's outside India and he's coming into India and he's providing certain supplies of goods or services which are taxable. Okay, and therefore he is liable to compulsorily get himself registered under GST. E-commerce operators, we know who are e-commerce operators. Those are the persons who, okay, do the business on an electronic platform. So they provide an electronic platform for the supply of goods or services. Next, persons who are required to deduct tax under section 51 whether or not separately registered under this act. So we know the concept of TDS, okay, that is tax deducted at source. So when any person is required to deduct TDS, they are required to be compulsory registered under GST. Next, persons who make taxable supply of goods or services or both on behalf of another taxable supply, whether as an agent or otherwise. So suppose a third party is supplying the goods and services on behalf of the main party. Okay, either as an agent or apart from an agent, he is required to get himself compulsorily registered. Next, input service distributor, whether or not separately registered under this act. I already told you what is the meaning of input service distributor. He is nothing. It is an office where the main work of this input service distributor is to distribute the input, okay, to different states based on the turnover of the same person having the same PAN. Next is every person supplying online information and database access or retrieval services from a place outside India to a place in India other than a registered person. So any person who is providing OIDAR services, he is required to get himself liable. He is compulsory required to get himself registered under GST. Persons who are required to pay tax under reverse charge under section 9 subsection 5, so that we have already covered. Okay, next, such other persons or class of persons as may be notified by government on the recommendation of council. So again, the government may notify certain category of persons only on the recommendation of council. They are required to be compulsorily registered under GST. So these are the certain category of persons who are compulsorily required to get registered under GST. So students, is this clear to you all?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, next. Let us see what is the procedure for registration. Okay. Now, just go with the flow as I'm just reading. Just go with the flow. Every person liable to get registered and persons seeking voluntary registration shall, before applying for registration, declare his PAN number, mobile number, email address, state or union territory in Part A of Form GST REG01 on GST Common Portal. Now let us understand this. Suppose I am providing services, my turnover has exceeded 20 lakhs. First case. Second case, I am providing taxable services, but my turnover is only 5 lakhs. But still, I'm interested in getting myself registered under GST. See, I'm not mandatorily required because my turnover is only 5 lakhs. It is not exceeding 20. But still, if voluntarily I want, I can take GST registration. I'm not mandatorily required. I'm not falling under the compulsory category, but voluntary, my own wish. I want to register under GST. So students, suppose if a person is liable to get registered, suppose my turnover crosses 20 lakhs, then I'm liable for registration. And suppose I want more voluntary registration. So what is the first step that I need to do? Simple. I need to first go to part A. There are two parts for procedure for registration. See, form REG01. When I say form REG01, REG stands for registration. GST registration 01. So the first form that you need to fill is GST REG01 on GST Common Portal. Now, where will this form be available? GST Common Portal, which I showed you all in my lectures, www.gst.gov.in. In this is a common portal where you can register yourself, make payments, file returns. So it is a common portal for all the GST related activities. So first and foremost, what you have to do, fill part A of fill part A, and the form number is GST registration 01, where what you're going to do, you're going to declare your PAN number, mobile number, email address, and your state from where you're providing your taxable supply or where your business is situated. Is this clear? Next, whatever PAN number you're writing, mobile number you're writing, and email address are validated. Now, how are they validated? PAN is validated online by common portal from CBDT database, that is Central Board of Direct Taxes. Whenever you enter your PAN number, they will cross check the PAN number and the details that you've written, that is your name, middle name. They will cross check with the direct tax database. Okay. Next, your mobile number and email address will be verified by sending a password on it. So remember students, first and foremost, okay, you're going to fill form GST REG01. After filling in that form, you're going to fill your PAN number, email address, mobile number. All this is going to be validated. How your PAN number is going to be validated? By validating, by cross-checking it with the same information in the CBDT site, okay, database, and your mobile number and email address will be validated by sending a password on it. Okay, once these are validated, suppose once your PAN number is correct, once your mobile number is validated, your email address has been verified, Then a TRN will be generated and it will be communicated to the applicant on the validated mobile number and email address. So one TRN, that is TRN is temporary reference number, will be generated, and this number will be communicated to that particular person who is applying for registration through his mobile number or email address which he is given. Okay, so up to here is the steps clear, students? So just remember, first, if anyone wants to make voluntary registration or anyone wants to get registered under GST, he should first declare his PAN number, mobile number, email address in Part A of Form GST REG01 on GST Common Portal. Once he does that, the system will validate the PAN number that is written, mobile number that is written, and email address is written. PAN number will be validated by CBDT side, email address and mobile number will be validated by sending a password on it. Once everything is found to be correct, TRN, temporary reference number, will be generated and communicated on that particular mobile number or email address. Up to here, is the step clear, students? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, to okay. Next, using this temporary reference number. Now, using this number, what the applicant has to do is he has to fill an application in part B. This was part A. Next comes part B. So, using the TRN, the applicant shall electronically submit an application in part B of application form along with specified documents on the common portal. So what he has to do is he has to fill an application form for registration where the basic details will be asked. Okay. With the help of the TRN, he can proceed further. So with the help of TRN, he will proceed further to part B of the application form along with the specified documents at the common portal. Now, when I say specified documents, so for example, what it is going to be, suppose I'm starting my business in a rented premises. So what will be my address proof? Okay, my identity proof. Okay, the place where I'm starting the business is on rent. So rent agreement, electricity bill. So all these documents, what is the nature of business that I'm going to start? So all these basic documents has to be uploaded on the common portal, which will support the business that I'm making. So application form will have your general students, it will have general information like if you're into partnership, who are the number of partners you have, what are the number of partners you have, where do they stay, what is their address, what is the address of your business, that what is the address of the business that you're starting, then what is the nature of your business, okay, which category are you following, what is the HSN that you're going to use when you're going to supply that particular goods. Next, and for all these supporting documents has to be attached. Suppose I say that we are two partners, so how do I prove that? By uploading the identity and address proof of the two partners and the rent agreement of that particular premises, by electricity bill of that particular premises. So all these documents are supporting my business, supporting the validity of my business, supporting the proof that yes, I'm starting the business genuinely. So next is using TRN, applicant shall electronically submit application in part B of application form along with specified documents at the common portal. Now, next what happens is, on receipt of such application, an acknowledgement in prescribed form shall be issued to the applicant electronically. So the applicant will fill the form, will submit the form. Now, once the applicant has submitted the form electronically, he will get an acknowledgement. Acknowledgement means the system will tell, yes, we have received your application. Okay. A casual taxable person applying for registration gets a TRN for making advance deposit of tax in electronic cash ledger, and an acknowledgement is issued only after said deposit. So in case of casual taxable person, whatever advance he is paying, whatever he is depositing advance in the form of tax, it will be credited to his tax ledger, electronic cash ledger. Now regarding this we will be seeing in detail ahead, what is cash ledger, credit ledger. Okay, so just remember, once the application is submitted online, what happens is the system will generate an acknowledgement, okay, that it has received the application. Next, That application by the system will be forwarded to whom? The proper officer. Now who is proper officer? Officer or the department of GST, they have hired certain authorities of GST who will cross check whether the documents that are produced are correct or no. So they will verify. So proper officer is nothing but an officer of GST or GST authority who will check the application, okay, whether to give the registration or not. Now once the application reaches the proper officer, the next part, what does the proper officer do after seeing that application, we will be seeing in part number 2, that is in our next slide. So the procedure after receipt of application by proper officer is depicted in part number 2. So let us first understand whether you have understood part number 1. Quickly, I'll just revise. What happens is anyone who wants registration should first go to GST common portal, that is www.gst.gov.in. There he has to select the form GST REG01. In that form he has to write his PAN number, mobile number, email address. Once he writes that, the system will validate the PAN number using the CPDT database. They will validate the mobile number and email address by sending one-time password on it. Once that is done, okay, once that is done, the PAN number, mobile number, email address is validated, a temporary reference number will be generated, and this number will be given on the mobile number and email address that is being provided. Now using this temporary reference number, what the applicant has to do, he has to fill an application in part B along with specified documents, okay, and he has to upload it on common portal. The common portal, what the portal, the system, what it will do, once it has received the application, he will give an acknowledgement to the applicant stating that your application has been received, and such application the system will forward it to the proper officer. Now what the proper officer will do with the application, let us see. Now part 2. Now the application is in the hands of proper officer. Proper officer examines the application and accompanying documents. I told you all the documents which are required. So what the proper officer, he will go through the application and all the documents. Suppose he found that the application is correct, the documents are in order, okay, if he's finding everything to be correct, yes, if he's finding everything to be correct, yes, then within 3 working days from the date of submission of application, proper officer will grant GST registration in the form GST REG06. So suppose if the proper officer is finding that yes, the application form filled is absolutely correct, he is satisfied with that, the documents uploaded are finding to be in order and correct, then what the proper officer should do, within 3 days, within 3 working days from the date when the application was submitted, from that date, within 3 working days, he has to grant the GST registration certificate to the applicant. In which form number? Form number GST REG06. Okay. But suppose the applicant is not finding it to be in order, then the proper officer issues notice electronically within 3 working days from application date, thereby seeking clarification, information or documents from the applicant. So what does this mean? Suppose I'm the proper officer. I'm going through the documents and I'm going through the application and I'm finding not satisfied. I'm finding some information is missing. The documents is something incorrect. So what I'll do, within 3 working days, I will inform the applicant that please, I want some clarification on this particular information that you have provided. Okay. Now, if applicant has furnished the clarification information or document within 7 working days from the receipt of notice. So from the receiving the notice from the proper officer, if the applicant is giving the clarification within 7 working days, and after receiving the clarification, if the officer is satisfied with the clarification, then within 7 days if he is giving, and if the proper officer is satisfied with the clarification, then within 7 working days from the receipt of clarification, the proper officer will grant certificate, GST registration certificate. But suppose The applicant does not provide clarification within 7 working days. No, okay, does not provide, then the proper officer will reject the application for reasons to be recorded in writing. Suppose if clarification is not provided only by the applicant, he forgets, within 7 working days has lapsed, then what the officer will do? He will reject the application for registration. Okay, so this is the particular procedure for registration. Now, there is deemed approval of application. What is the meaning of deemed approval of application? If the proper officer fails to take any action within 3 working days from the date of submission of application or within 7 working days from the date of receipt of clarification, the application for grant of registration shall be deemed to have been approved. See, here the proper officer is having the time of only 3 working days. If he's finding it in order, he's having time only 3 working days to give the registration certificate. And here, if he wants clarification, he has time within only 7 working days to give the GST registration certificate. Suppose if the proper officer is not doing his action in 3 days or 7 days, then it will be deemed that the application is been approved. It will be deemed that the applicant is registered under GST. So once again, I repeat this. Proper officer will go through the documents. If he's finding it in order, within 3 days, he's going to give the GST registration certificate. If he's not finding it in order, he will ask for certain clarification to the applicant. The applicant should respond to that clarification within 7 days. If he's responding to the clarification within 7 days and the proper officer is satisfied with the clarification, then he will grant the GST registration certificate within 7 days. Suppose if the applicant is not providing the information or clarification within 7 working days, then the proper officer will reject the application. But suppose the proper officer is not taking the action within 3 working days or 7 working days respectively, then it will be deemed that the application of the applicant is being approved. So is the procedure for registration clear, students? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. Let us move ahead. What is deemed registration? Registration under GST is not tax specific, which means that there is a single registration for all the taxes: IGST, CGST, UTGST, SGST, and cesses. Grant of registration UIN under any CGST, UTGST Act is deemed to be registered UIN under this CGST Act, provided application for registration has not been rejected under CGST Act. Further, rejection of application for registration UIN under SGST Act, UTGST Act is deemed to be rejection of application for registration under CGST Act. Now, let me explain this very simple. Deemed registration means once you have taken registration, okay, under SGST Act. Suppose I have taken registration under the state of Karnataka because I'm doing only business under the state of Karnataka. That means I have taken registration to even provide outward supplies for IGST. So they are telling that the registration is not tax specific, means I need not take separate registration for IGST Act, CGST Act, SGST Act. Once you have taken registration under SGST Act, that means you can also charge CGST, IGST. You need not take registration separately for different taxes that you're charging. So GST registration is not tax specific. You, four taxes are there: CGST, IGST, UTGST, SGST or cess. Now you need not take separate registration for all the taxes that you're charging. Once you have taken registration under SGST Act, it is deemed that you have taken registration under CGST Act, UTGST Act, IGST Act, and cess. So did everyone understand what is the meaning of deemed registration? Yes, students? Yes, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.